Resilient humans. The new science of resiliency is exciting and hopeful. By changing the lens from trauma to resiliency, we understand that as humans, we have evolved by being resilient despite the trauma we might have endured. In fact, resilience is the norm and not the exception. Extrapolated research on resilience leads us to believe that a list of resilient traits can be neatly followed, and we can grow the list of skills to become more resilient. Scientifically, these lists of traits that are commonly touted have little significance, each one on their own. This conundrum is referred to as the resilience paradox. We can identify statistical correlates of resilience, the so-called traits of resilient people, but paradoxically, when something aversive happens, these correlates don't actually tell us much about who will be resilient and who will not. However, there are evidence-based interventions such as teaching, good parenting skills, hardiness training, meditation, mindfulness, and aerobic exercise that support increased resiliency. While resilience is often said to be the least likely response to trauma, and those who triumph somehow in a special category with other select few, the concept of resilience trajectory tells us a different story. Research findings support that when people in otherwise normal circumstances are exposed to an isolated or potentially highly disruptive event, they commonly maintain a stable trajectory toward returning to healthy function over time. While cultivating skills that support resiliency, it's important to view our students as resilient and not as victims of trauma. Trauma is part of life, and it is possible to be on a resilience trajectory by using specific techniques honed to regulate one's nervous system and grow through the trauma. Research indicates that 75% of us will experience trauma, and approximately 8 to 12% will receive a diagnosis of PTSD. Of the 75% who have gone through some form of trauma, 60% experience post traumatic growth, PTG. Post traumatic growth is a phenomenon where adversity is transformative and leads to us becoming stronger, wiser humans. While many practitioners use somatic exercises to support PTG or post traumatic growth, this book is not that book. This book's main premise is to provide practical ways to understand one's nervous system within the context of being a learner who exemplifies post traumatic growth and a resilience trajectory. The use of movement is the foundation for helping ourselves and our students shift nervous system states from disorganized mobilization or shutdown to a place where learning is possible and supported by the nervous system. For 25 plus years, I've used movement as an important strategy to increase regulation and improve learning retention in classrooms and clinics throughout my program, School Moves. This book is a continuation of my School Moves for Learning program. The School Moves program focuses on improving proprioceptive feedback, a sense that allows for perception of movement, location, and action in the body, as well as strengthening core stability, bilateral integration, vestibular functioning, auditory visual integration, and visual skills. If learners don't have these skills solidly in place, the whole learning foundation is a wobbly wall waiting to collapse at the first sign of challenge, thus creating less resilient and less adaptable humans. Please be sure to work on students' learning foundations while implementing the activities in this book. For those familiar with School Moves, I've reframed some of the routines and movement activities to provide additional ways of shifting nervous system states and keeping ourselves and our students on a resilience trajectory. I've designed this book to highlight key scientific findings that support learners becoming more resilient and the understanding that there isn't a checklist I can provide, but rather a path that may lead us to a place of greater resiliency. I'm integrating polyvagal theory with future studies methodology and extended mind science to create a powerhouse trilogy of valuable resources that complement one another. They provide the shopping list for supplies needed to pack backpacks that support students who move forward toward their goals while learning how to be happy, regulated humans in the world. I'll explain each of these areas of research to provide a roadmap of where we are going to discover tools and activities to pack into learners' backpacks that support their growth toward resiliency. The focus of this book is presenting the neuroscience of learning and teaching students how to be buoyant and academically resilient so they can reach their maximum potential despite setbacks they might encounter along the way. Let's think of this as a resiliency-inspired approach to educating humans in the classroom. If you haven't read book 1 in the Polyvagal Path series, let's begin with an introduction to polyvagal theory to get you up to speed. Resilience through a polyvagal lens. When building new school campuses, should architects include walkways in the design, or is it better to design and build the campus buildings but let the students create the pathways before paving? Invariably, students choose the shortest route from point A to point B. They'll carve paths in the lovely grass to shave 5 minutes off their trips between campus buildings. Students take the shorter route even if the longer one is nicely paved, more scenic, and offers opportunities to meet interesting people along the way. After teaching and training staff for many years, I know that like our students, you most likely enjoy the shortcuts as well. Those books that shave minutes to years off the learning curve. Whether you're a seasoned polyvagalist or you've just stepped onto the polyvagal path, let's carve out a direct route from point A to point B. Dr. Stephen Porges, a professor of psychiatry, developed the polyvagal theory and presented his first paper to the Society of Psychophysiological Research in the mid-90s. His complex scientific theory needed translation for practitioners looking to apply it to clinical disciplines such as psychotherapy, counseling, social services, and education. Deb Dana, introduced earlier, discovered Dr. Porter's work and began applying the key principles during sessions with her clients. As she witnessed the improved clinical outcomes, especially for those who experienced trauma, she continued to develop the language and tools to make polyvagal theory accessible to other clinicians and their clients. Through a polyvagal lens, resilience is explained as an outcome of a nervous system that moves from patterns of connection to protection and back to connection with some ease, as measured by observing how often we get pulled into protection, how long we stay in a protected state, and the ease in which we return to regulation. Our daily experiences move us in and out of regulation. However, an important concept to understand is that resilience isn't about having a nervous system that is always in regulation. It's the flexibility of the nervous system to become dysregulated and return to regulation that creates the platform for resilience. The ANS Update 2.0. The autonomic nervous system is comprised of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. The phrase fight or flight is commonly used in everyday conversations when describing someone's sympathetic response to a threatening situation. After the threat is passed, the perception is that the parasympathetic nervous system returns the body back to homeostasis, even keel, if you will. The parasympathetic nervous system is often thought of as a state of rest and digestion. Polyvagal theory updates this model by explaining the autonomic nervous system differently than it's been taught for centuries. The vagus nerve, getting a lot of attention these days in somatic and healing methods, is where the update takes place for the nervous system, and how the theory came to be named the polyvagal theory. Poly in Latin means more than one or many, as in the vagus nerve has more than one pathway, the ventral vagus and dorsal vagus pathways. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, connecting to the brain and face and to organs in the body. The vagus nerve makes up most of the parasympathetic nervous system and has two pathways. These pathways are responsible for different responses in the body. The ventral vagus pathway sends messages of safety to the brain, making it possible to connect and engage with others. The ventral vagal state is one of safety and connection. In the classroom, we would consider this to be the optimal learning state. The dorsal vagus pathway is responsible for shutting down our systems when the threat or danger is too great to fight or flee. In the case that the sympathetic response of fight or flight wasn't sufficient to get us out of danger, the dorsal vagal shutdown response may be initiated to keep us safe. There are also blended states where two states come together to create variable responses. Let's hold that discussion for a bit later and stay with the three main states until you are comfortable with the formal names. To review, these three states are ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal. You'll learn easy ways to remember the ANS states in step 1 coming up. A canvas scenario demonstrating your ANS in action. Let's look at how staff's and students' nervous systems respond to an active shooter-intruder drill. Sometimes the staff knows in advance the day and time of the drill, while at other times there is no warning. If you and your students are prepared ahead of time, the odds of staying in a ventral vagal state of safety and connection are relatively high. On the other hand, if the intruder drill is unexpected and there is an unknown variable that there may be an actual intruder, you and your students' nervous systems will respond to the danger with more vigilance. Some students' nervous systems may release a cocktail of chemicals that activate a sympathetic response of fight or flight. This may include panic, locking doors, running into a closet, or gathering anything in the classroom that may be used for protection. This is because the sympathetic nervous system responds through mobilization and action. For other students, the loud sound of the intruder alarm and the stress of not knowing if the alarm is real may activate the dorsal vagal shutdown response. Teachers have shared that students cry, hide under the desk, and take a long time to come out of shutdown after the alarm has stopped or the perceived threat has passed. These students' nervous systems may have tried to mobilize, but registered the threat as too great, requiring a parasympathetic dorsal vagal shutdown response. Obviously, intruder drills disrupt feelings of safety. Understanding the impact intruder drills have on students' nervous systems helps make the drills less traumatic for students. When you and your students learn how to notice and name your states, unpredictable responses to drills now have some predictability. Stay in parasympathetic ventral vagal and calmly deal with the drill. Activate a sympathetic fight or flight response, or activate a parasympathetic dorsal vagal shutdown response. Viewing nervous system responses through a polyvagal lens of safety is an effective way to understanding your nervous system, a system that is constantly monitoring signals of danger to keep you safe. The stress created by the drill and the body's response to the stress requires completing what's referred to as the stress cycle, so the event becomes less traumatic for staff and students. When you create an after-drill ritual that you and your students enjoy, this brings the grounding energy of ventral vagal back online and completes the stress cycle. A ritual can be as simple as moving to a song. Shaking out arms and legs is an effective way to reset the nervous system. The most impactful part of polyvagal theory is the realization that your responses are somewhat predictable, and you have more conscious choice over your responses than you might think. Your ANS is your best friend, whose sole purpose is to keep you safe and healthy by sending constant updates about your current physical and emotional state. Just like updates on your computer, you need to turn on notifications and notice when your ANS sends you information about your nervous system states. It's important to pay attention. I hear teachers tell me that their passion for teaching and helping students overrides their body's communication system. Listening to cues from the body that you need food, rest, a bathroom break, or emotional support is important for reducing burnout. We may be different each in our own way. What we have in common is our universal operating system, the autonomic nervous system. Through the application of polyvagal theory in our classrooms, we find commonality and predictability within classroom diversity. When you understand how the autonomic nervous system operates, you'll be able to apply that knowledge to how you implement programs already in place. You won't replace programs with anything in this book. You'll supplement all the good stuff you already do with insights provided through polyvagal guided activities. Beginning with the nervous system can increase the effectiveness of programs you currently implement. Polyvagal theory isn't one more thing. It's the one thing you need to understand to make all the other things you do more powerful. Once you know your way around the polyvagal campus, you'll begin experiencing life inside and outside your classroom through a polyvagal lens of safety, connection, curiosity, and possibility. There is a bidirectional loop between the mind and body. We've covered the body portion of the loop by explaining the important role of the ANS plays in resiliency. Now let's complete the loop by exploring the mind's role in supporting or limiting resilience. Future studies' role in resilience. While completing my professional doctorate program, the head of the department encouraged me to use a futures methodology for my research. Even the title of the methodology, causal layered analysis, screams scholarly gibberish. As I read research articles and explored CLA, certainty arose along with an inner knowing that we need to use CLA in the field of education with our students and personally in our lives. CLA, developed by Sohail and Ayatollah, provides an organized method for deconstructing our myths and metaphors and reconstructing them in a way that nets us the future we desire. While working with high school students, all reading at between first and third grade levels, I had to unpack their myths about their ability to learn before I could make any progress with them. CLA is a powerful process for creating the space for transformative change. With polyvagal theory, we understand how our nervous system states may support or limit the narratives we create in our minds. With CLA, we now have a tool for organizing the narratives we create. When an optimal nervous system state aligns with a hopeful narrative, here is where we discover resilience. So Hale and I have coined this process embodied CLA. In the lessons to come, you'll learn how to involve learners in their own transformational process to let go of their used future, the one that doesn't serve them, and embrace a future filled with optimism and hope. Extended mind science and resiliency. Paul shares that philosophers Clark and Chalmers asked the question, where does the mind stop and the rest of the world begin? They propose that we think not only with our brains, but with our bodies, tools in our environment, the spaces where we learn, and the people in those spaces. They pose that the mind is shaped by the experiences outside itself. Our brain-centric view of the world reduces cognition to what goes on inside the mind and thus limits cognition to the confines of the brain's boundaries. What does the science of learning say about how we learn? Recent research supports the concept that learning isn't all in our minds. In fact, we learn with our bodies, embodied cognition, by utilizing the environment, situated cognition, and interacting with others, distributed cognition. We'll integrate these types of cognition into the resiliency paradigm and demonstrate how utilizing extended mind science supports learners becoming academically buoyant, able to bounce back from adversity. About the backpack essential tools and activities. The tools and activities in each of the steps focus on becoming familiar with the ANS states and the learning path, moving towards specific goals with a backpack full of resources that support becoming more resilient. The tools are designed for the adults and mentors. The activities are for the students. Use any of the tools or activities for literature circles or book clubs to dive deeper into understanding the characters. This is a terrific way for students to learn about nervous system states and apply polyvagal theory, future studies, and extended mind science within the context of the literacy curriculum. Use the templates to create group experiences with poster paper and markers. Bring the activities to life. Put on your Curious Explorer hat and see where the journey takes you. Remember, there is no such thing as a failed activity. You are in a judgment-free zone. Invite a colleague or friend to join you with implementing one or more of the activities. It'll be a lot more enjoyable with a supportive, collaborative partner or team walking beside you. These tools and activities are guidelines to start your imagination flowing. Let your mind come out and play.